Nephilim heroes learn of the biblical origins to their powers. Friends empowered by astral entities become mortal enemies when one friend starts killing for more power. Principality bails against delinquent teen time traveler and young Jesus. Angel warns Christian superheroes of a multidimensional threat. Heroes assembled by God, spiritual warfare ninja clan, and Antichrist plot to take over the world. Heroes unite to stop resurrected Nephilim from destroying the multiverse. Heroes battle against the Antichrist for the soul of their son. Superhero preacher allies with heroes sent back in time after villain wipes out 5 billion people. Son of Christian heroes rebels and joins the Antichrist but goes insane. Pastor turned superhero held back from ending a villain but leads to catastrophic event. Angel confronts villain who tries to cheat salvation. These are just some of the video titles surrounding the 33 Christian themed comics that we reviewed on the Xplanations YouTube channel in 2024. And in this installment of the Kedoshim Initiative Podcast, we're going to judge each of them against our Christian fiction judgment scale to determine which ones are definitely worth the read and which ones just didn't hit the mark and could have done with a lot more refinement. Welcome back to the 16th installment of the Kedoshim Initiative Podcast. In this installment, we're going to be ranking all 33 of the Christian themed comics that we covered in the year of 2024. This is going to be a recurring podcast. The last podcast in November would be our ranking all the comics that we've covered on the channel. Did it last year, November, I think, for 2023. We're doing it this year for 2024 and next year again for 2025. But before we get directly into the ranking, you guys know, the regulars, we have some formality and stuff to catch up on. How has your month been? Mine's been busy. The virtual production stuff has been, can't wait to show you guys that or when that finally hits. No, actually, I could show you one of the stuff that I did recently. Well, I'll link it in the description. We'll keep this to the comic review. For Revelation Media, the real story of Christmas, that is one of the recent projects that I did some environment and lighting and reshoots for and character placement for that got published. But other than that, I've been extremely busy. Since last podcast, we've put a lot of the intercession individual character profiles up on the Patreon in the free tier that you could go check out. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving as well for everyone who celebrates Thanksgiving in the US. Mine has been pretty cool. Had family flying here from Boston here to Trinidad. Yeah, that's it. As you see in the background of me, just a little the 2-minute ramble before we actually get into everything. This is a little undertaking that I did on making a comic book shop. Now, I've actually never been to a comic book shop because we don't have comic book shops here in Trinidad. No widespread access to comics here in Trinidad. There are no comic book shops, and most of the bookstores here don't carry comics. You'll quicker find one of those Marvel encyclopedia stuff than actual comics. So I actually don't own any physical comics. Okay, the first set of physical comics I actually own is the Ripperverse books. Actually, I some issue 1 and 2, and I forgot that I bought on the sale. But I actually don't own physical comics. I have never been to a comic book shop, and I just felt like putting this together with all the pictures and stuff that I have from the comics that we've covered. So hope you guys like my little Xplanations comic book shop that we have going here with all the different faith-based creators, all the different faith-based comics that we've covered over from last year into this year, as well as some of my stuff that I'm currently putting together as well in there with Gabriel and the Guardians on the screen. Next year, I definitely would love to cover that series. I listened into the how to write, how to craft wonderful stories by one of the head writers. They did it in a Discord server 2-3 weeks ago, and I'm definitely excited to see what that show is going to be, and we'll definitely be judging it on our Christian fiction judgment scale next year. But that's enough catch up. Let me know how you guys been over the last month in the comments below, because now it's time to get into putting all 33 of these comics on our Christian fiction judgment scale. And as always, this is just, I like to be a little facetious when I do this thing, just make it a little bit more dramatic than it actually is. Because as always, this isn't meant to bash and tear down, but critique and build up. The entire channel is all about elevating Christian creatives as well as providing reviews and just, I can't really say objective because this is a lot of subjective reviews. After all, this is my list of ranking these comics in order. Some of you might like one more than the other, completely disagree with me, etc. And that's fine. That's all part of fandom. But this is just me ranking all 33 comics that we've covered on the channel from what I would least recommend or didn't like too much to what I recommend and even what I most recommend and even reread at, because it's one of my favorite books that I've covered. I am not going to review the channel. Most of these are just have like 4 lines just to give you a basic plot rundown of what went on, what I think, what I thought didn't work, or what I think worked really well. When we get more into like the top 5 area, they more like have more of a paragraph for those. But this is just like a quicker rundown against all the comics that we've covered. All links to purchase them, if you would like, would be in the blog post attached. The corresponding blog for this podcast episode at the Xplanations / K.I.P episodes number 16. Link is in the description down below, and it should be popping up in the top right hand corner of your screen right now. But that's it for my little formality rambles. Let's get into it, starting with number 33 to 31, because I reviewed all of these together. Is the Resurrection comic book series issues 0, 1, and 2. Written by David Atta with art by Stanley /Stange Obadi and Michael Bologan, and published by Republic Comics. This was the what if the Resurrection was adopted into a Marvel or DC style superhero comic book? Noble concept, awesome artwork, okayish story, and insane theology. And I kid you not, this story would have worked even in the murky territory it started off in. I liked the first issue. It was just a cool retelling of the court of Pilate to the cross on Calvary, but through the perspective of Satan and another demonic entity, which was pretty well done. Then there was a fictionalizing of when Jesus got to hell and all the demonic entities that tried to hold him back, but he put them to open shame, then taken off to heaven with the thief that was on the cross going with him too. I know that's a fictionalizing of what the scripture says, but that aspect honestly was really good. I liked it, as well as the banter between Satan and Abaddon and the other demonic entities expressing their shock at the moment of what happened. That was all pretty well done. But then it went off a cliff when it got to heaven and the issue 0 of the series that showed what happened at the Garden of Gethsemane. I kid you not, when Jesus got to heaven, he signaled he was about to go to war against death and that he will need everyone for such a battle. And by everyone, according to the cast pinup, which is all I can go against, is that consisted of Eve, yes, Adam's Eve, Moses, Samson, and Elijah. The artwork was awesome. Like, Eve's artwork was a reference point for one of my own characters named Omega in my Intercession comic book. But it was an instant theological nuke score for me. Like, it got a 1.5 out of 5 because when we got to the interpretation of the Garden of Gethsemane and Jesus being tempted by Satan, Jesus put together a plan that instead of him being the one that is tempted by Satan, he had the archangel Michael face the temptation by shapeshifting into Jesus. When I tell you I have never been more dumbfounded by a theological perspective in a comic book before, I mean it. This was the first comic we've reviewed that has scored a 1.5 out of 5 score on our scale. And I like books where a resurrected Nephilim is going throughout the Christian multiverse causing havoc. I've never had a comic that has tipped me over the edge that much. I think the only thing that came close was Alfred issue 2, where James did that madness with bringing the apostles into modern day, and the way he did it, I did not like it. I told him I didn't like it, and I love James. Like, James is on board to be the cover artist for my comic book. I just didn't like that approach to his story in issue 2. But for the most part, up to issue 1, the way he did Wes's character development, I ended up falling in love with the Alfred books, and I look forward to issue 6 next year. But this one just... it went off the theological rails so far off that I couldn't even recommend it, even though it was a free comic book. Some awesome artwork. Like, it got a 3 story, 5 out of 5 on art, 1.5 for theological basis, and 2.5 for recommendation score. Therefore, all 3 issues sit at the bottom of our list for 2024. Even though I love the artwork and the story of issue 1 and 2 were decent, the theological swing it did in the issue 0 and I think at the end of issue 2 just didn't work at all for me. And I honestly believe it would have done well if it didn't go into the Michael shapeshifted into Jesus run. I've heard wild perspectives from, like, Christian perspectives, atheist perspectives on the death and resurrection of Christ, but I've never heard that one. Or taking Eve and Moses into battle. Like, that is just that's the best way I could put it. That's like, in trying to be creative, you ventured so far away from the gospel. That was literally like way too far for me to even put a proper recommendation on it. And they never did an issue 3, but I honestly would have really liked to know how exactly they were going to execute on the idea of Moses, Eve, Adam, and Elijah going into battle against death with Jesus. I was already in deep. I just needed to know how that was going to be executed. But it never was executed on, so that's it for the first entry onto the list. Resurrection issue 0, 1, and 2 got an overall score from us of 3 out of 5. Next on the list is Red Talon issue 1, which got a 2.67 overall score from us, with 3 for story, 2.5 for artwork and creativity, 0 for theological basis, because Red Talon books, the author is a Christian and it is adjacent to the Starcross Comics universe, because it is within the Starcross Comics universe, but the book itself doesn't have any theological elements as yet. I have been promised that, according to the owner of Starcross, that just wait till issue 4 or 5 and I'll definitely have something to see on the theological basis. Joe Spicer likes to hype me up with those things, so I'll see on a theological basis when it comes to the next issues next year. And it got a 2.5 score on the recommendation scale. And though it sits so far down on our list, Red Talon issue 1 by Ken Keller, for me personally, is the best example of the scripture Zechariah 4:10, which you have heard me say if you tune into previous podcasts. Time and time again, I like the NLT version of it, which is, "Don't despise the small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." I don't know if Ken will apply that scripture to his creative journey. Definitely will have him on the podcast for an interview next year once our schedules align. He is a brother in Christ, as I said, but everyone's journey is different, and none of his books, as I said, has had any theological elements in it thus far. But it shows that it isn't really about where you start, but it's really about where you're going and the improvements you continue to see as you continue on that journey. Because each of the issues of the series take a major jump in quality wise in all aspects, of which we will see where issue 2 and issue 3 are placed on the list, which I commend a lot. So, though this book is in my only take a look at it if you already bought everything else on the list or have checked out everything available in all other categories on Starcross, then you would take a look at this book, or unless you like Red Talon and Ken Keller stuff. But other than that, it is the best example of showing growth in a creator's journey that I have ever reviewed on the channel thus far. Next on the list is Atoman Issue 0 by Grok Comics. This one got a 3.17 overall score, with 3 for story, 3.5 for artwork and creativity, 0 for theological basis, and a 3 on the recommendation score. This comic, I believe, was a restoration reprint style of comic of the original Atoman hero from, I think, 1950s or 60s. A handful of the remnant heroes are older, well, old as in 1950, I think, Golden Age comic, public domain. Heroes that are now, characters that are now in public domain. Bill Robb of the Remnant likes to take them and like just fictionalize them into his world that is caused into chaos by the premature rise of the Antichrist, or in one of the cases, I know in the case of Atoman, his grandson, the Bill's take on it is the grandson of the Golden Age hero, Bill's creation, his grandson, learns of his grandfather's past, and that the suit is linked through the family lineage, and becomes a hero within the remnant. But Bill also has just likes restoring these old Golden Age comics, that like the more obscure ones, so he takes them and restores them and does a double print run with the Golden Age comic mixed with his story in there. And I believe this was the first one that he did, and it's pretty cool. But for me personally, it's more like more of a passion project of Bill than one of the comics I am actually interested in. That is the best way I could put it. I like what he's doing with it, but it's not really one of the comics I would like highly recommend on my scale. At least Atoman issue 0. Probably for the future ones, maybe with the other ones like Dare, and I think the Black Rover run recently came out of characters from the Golden Age brought forward into his comic book universe. I love the Remnant comic book universe, but this wasn't one that excited me all that much. At number 28, we have The Relentless Tin Soldier by Nicholas Gurr, with artwork by Alessandro Ventura and Eduardo Garcia. And this comic got 2.75 overall score, with a 2.75 for story, a 3 for artwork and creativity, 0 for theological basis, because the Tin Soldier story doesn't have any. It's Starcross adjacent, but there isn't no heavy theological stuff within the story itself, with a 2.5 out of 5 recommendation score. And this was actually the last comic that we reviewed last year, but it came out the weekend after our first podcast installment of ranking all comics we reviewed in 2023. So I brought it forward into 2024. And I'll be honest, as I said in my review, the story of Relentless Tin Soldier is yet to really grip me. I just love the art of Tin Soldier's overall design, but don't really have much to say other than that. I do look forward to issue 3, despite how I feel about issue 1 and 2, and I see the potential with it that has been set up, and I just like Tin Soldier's design a lot. And I think it's just the execution of his story, which I went into detail in those reviews, talking about what I didn't like too much about it, which you can check out those reviews, because this isn't a re-review of the comic, just quickly giving you something about it and moving on to the next one, which is number 27, Atradian Justice. And I was critical on the story simply because it failed to make me care about the whole superpowered family and has to stop the impending evil angle of the story they were trying to go for. Mainly because of the way the supporting characters were introduced into the mix from the main guy. It was a you get powers, he gets powers, we all get powers kind of manner, which just wasn't interesting to me. The series itself has a solid concept though, and I look forward to seeing where they'll take it, especially with the setup with what they did with the Father of Evil and to see if they decide to flesh out the individual characters more. But that is something we shall have to wait for the next issue to see. It was written by Ralph Madrigal and Aaron Darwin with art by Joe DeSantos, Anna Carriage, and Joe Spicer. It got a 2.75 overall score with 2.5 for story, 3 for artwork and creativity, a 3 for theological basis because there were some theological elements in there, and a 2.5 score for recommendation. At number 26 on the list is The Remnant Secret Files issue 5. And the Remnant Secret Files books, just by nature, are more of a lore dump and fun fact style book, which will typically fall to my recommendation list in the section of I don't really recommend it. You only get it if you're like a guy like me who buys all the Remnant books because I review every like piece of Christian fiction that I could come across once it's within my schedule and content cadence. But this book, I'm not going to lie, I am a bit biased towards this issue of Secret Files because the Task Force Ally section of this issue features none other than the Set Apart one, which is my first ever original character. I'm not gonna lie, when Bill approached me to do the do the Set Apart one, I had a story idea for like my own creative endeavors, but I didn't even have a character fully fleshed out or developed. So I made like a kind of self-insert into the Remnant at the time. But it's cringy when I look back at his backstory that I put into the book. It is cringy. And I cringe a little bit. But that was just my first go at creating an original character. And from creating that character, it has paved the way for both the video game and comic book project that I have. Because like the 10-page Set Apart one introduction that I sent off the Bill, then spanned into two separate 100 plus page Word documents for my comic book series that I'm currently working on, Intercession, and my video game project, Parables of the Set Apart Deception, with a reworked version of the Set Apart one that is not a self-insert of myself into it. But I'm not going to touch you're not going to touch too deep into that because there's like separate videos and entire podcast installments on that you could check out. But other than that, it was your pretty standard Secret Files issue for The Remnant. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 overall score with 3 for story, 3 for artwork and creativity, 3 for theological basis, and 5 out of 5 on recommendation score because of my bias. I'm not gonna lie. Like, as my first original character put in the comic book. Of course, I'm gonna recommend it. At number 25, we have Blue Jay issue 1 from Asprey Comics. This is the first book from the Asprey comic line that I checked out because I did not know what the reading order was for Asprey Comics and asking around. I think either Joe or Ken Bowden gave me that. They thought that was the reading order. So I just like, you know what, I'll just do Blue Jay, then Tales of Power, then the other one-off books. And for the most part, it was a pretty decent story, following the typical superhero issue 1 formula, giving a little backstory, then how they got their power and their battle with their first villain. I like the elements that went over Jason's grief, but I can't deny the reveal of his powers was a little weak. Like, I thought it was a dream sequence with the way they implemented it, which I wasn't too fond of, but I did like the final battle of the comic between Blue Jay and Blue Jay issue 1, written by Mattia Bulgarelli and Gabriel Dill, with artwork credits to Antonio Garcia, Joma Bolda, Annalisa, Chris Agot, Arton Perigino, I am sorry for butchering you guys' names, and Francesca Zambon got 3.2 out of 3.5 overall score with 3.5 for story, 3.5 for artwork and creativity, 2.75 for theological basis, and a 3 for recommendation score. At number 24, we have Parables of the Remnant issue 8. This was the Anarchy Prime Rock backstory issue where Grok got shot and teleports with people who shot him to hell. Well, I'm just over exaggerating the issue, but in a nutshell, that is basically what happened. Though the author, Bill Robb, in our podcast interview, denies that Grok has the ability to send people to hell. If that's what you depict, that's what I'm gonna think it was. I like the story of this issue, especially the theme it tackled of being an outcast and finding your tribe, especially the aspects of it where, in the name of finding your tribe and trying to fit in, it can lead down a dark path. The only aspect of this issue I didn't like too much was the swearing in the comic panels. It was a little too off-putting for me, at least the way it was done. When I did my review, I did discuss it a lot, and in our interview with Bill Robb, the author and creator of the Remnant series, we did discuss it a bit more with him. This issue on our scale got a 3.5 out of 5 overall score with 3 for story, 3.5 out of 5 for artwork and creativity, 4 for theological basis, and 3.5 score for recommendation. It was written by Bill Robb himself, with artwork by Gilead Golrat and Lunio Alvarez. Next on the list, we have Dog and the Regulators issue 1. This issue was written by Bill Robb with artwork by Gilead Golrat and Brian Maigani. I'm sorry, I want to shout out all the artists, but I didn't reread it through these names before I actually started the recording, so I'm very sorry for butchering you guys' names. But this was the introduction to the street-level vigilantes in a world where God-appointed heroes take on the Antichrist, and it was a pretty decent first issue, giving a brief rundown on the members of the squad, which there are a lot of them, and one of their recent heroic acts that they have been gaining some traction for, particularly some nationwide recognition, to the point they were invited onto a talk show for an interview. It was a solid overall read that just served the purpose of setting things up for the group's future. So it was like more setup issue, like this is who we are, this is what we're gonna do, more to come soon kind of thing. Overall, it got 4 out of 5 with 3.75 on the story. I did. The story with what they did with Dog and all that was pretty well done. Artwork and creativity, 0 for theological basis. There wasn't much theological basis stuff in it. Well, at least when I reviewed it, I didn't say there was much theological basis stuff in it. But Evan David commented on the video saying, the Antichrist sacrificing someone at the end of the book isn't theological basis. And that did slip me when I actually did the scoring at the end one. I still keeping it as a 0. So 0 for theological basis and a 4 for recommendation score. I do recommend that you check out this book. Now we have gotten into the things that I like and would recommend section. It's funny that I just said that because next we have at number 22 Starcross United issue 1, which was the last comic reviewed on the channel, and it's actually doing pretty well in regards to the channel numbers. I think it's at 900 views. Usually if a comic review hits more than 200 views, I would consider it doing pretty well against the average, because usually average 100 to 150 views on per comic review, but that one is up there at 900. The algorithm picked that one and said, yes, you shall go forth into the algorithm. I'm pretty satisfied with that. And this one, to put it simply, was just a mashup of short stories from different Starcross comic books available at the time. Solid stuff, especially the 3-page opening where they detail the creation of the Starcross universe, which still holds as my favorite 3 pages in any comic we have covered. It's funny because it was in this comic, but I actually used it in one of the Biblical Proportions issue 1 intro. Because for me, that fit the Biblical Proportions story more than it fit the Starcross United book. So I used it in that when I did that review. But this book is, well, it actually was much lower. Looking at my list, it should be a bit lower, but I rearranged it because I had my numbers wrong. Looking at my script, this is some amateur stuff here. It should be a bit lower, but I'm gonna leave it at 22 because this range is stuff that the books I view them as more equal to each other. After 26, after 25, between 24 and 17, don't really have a set order is the best way I could put it. It doesn't really have a set order of what I least recommend to highly recommend. All of these are in the same category. But this book, when compared to others, I more simply recommend that you pick up every other Star-Crossed Comics issue 1. Well, not except the ones that I say, like, you could skip the issue 1. I'd more recommend you pick up the other Star-Crossed books as a whole that we have reviewed before getting this one, including Tin Soldier, which I'm not too fond of the story. I'll say this is more so like more collectors kind of thing. It's more magazine of, hey, these are the kind of stories that we have. It has the stories in it, I believe they said it is original stories in regards to, I think the Burning Skull story you won't see that backstory piece in the Red Talon books. So it's that kind of thing where it's like, oh, here's like just some extra information on the Burning Skull from the Red Talon or little background filler stuff. So I would recommend you pick up the other Star-Crossed books before you really pick this one up. It was written by multiple, it had multiple art credits and multiple writing credits because it was a slice from all the books available at the time, to my knowledge. Next one on the list at number 21 is God Issue 1 G.O.D, The Global Order Decree. The origin story behind the Nephilim experiment that escaped and became a hero after leaving behind a lot of chaos in its wake. Starstruck has made his way into one of my favorite characters out of the Star-Crossed Comics catalog. I believe he was in my top 8 heroes that we did earlier in the year. I can't remember where I placed him, but this is one of the more interesting fictional takes on the Nephilim that we have covered on the channel. It was also the goriest story on the channel that we have covered as well. But this comic as well is one of those that I only recommend if you have already picked up and checked out most of the other Star-Crossed comic books available that are ranked on this list and the list from last year. The artwork and everything was done by Joe Spicer, and it got a 3.5 overall score with 3.5 for story, 3.5 for artwork and creativity, 4 for theological basis, and a 3 for recommendation. I don't think I gave the score we gave Star-Crossed United. Well, that was the last review that we did for the year, but that one got 3.6 out of story, for artwork, 0 for theological basis, with 2.5 out of 5 for recommendation score. Next on the list at number 20 is Tales of Power Issue 1. The origin of Apex and my official introduction to the larger Asprey Comics world. I like this issue a lot as it simply was just a lot of fun to read through. It was one of the more recent ones I reviewed, so I'm not going to go too deep into what happened in the book, but I really like the interactions between Apex and Samantha as well as Oath and Scripture. Overall, this issue got a 3.66 score out of 5 with 3.5 for story, 3.5 for artwork and creativity, and 0 for theological basis. There wasn't nothing really theological to assess, with a 4 out of 5 recommendation score. Written by Paul Bell with art by Carlo Gradi and Katija Lujo. At number 19, we have Red Talon Issue 2 by Ken Keller. Remember what I said about Issue 1? This issue was a massive improvement when compared to Issue 1. This issue introduced a whole new cast into the Red Talon story, following right where the first issue left off with an infiltrate and destroy plan, turning into infiltrate, rescue, and destroy plan. Really like the introduction of Telpori. I can never get that name right. Telpori or Telepor. I think it's Telepor. and Night Eyes as they had a moment, especially in that segment where they had a moment to breathe and took the time to share their backstory. It was a solid issue all around. Written by Ken Keller with art by David Jackson and Brian Dawson and art credits by David Jackson, Brian Dawson, and Joe Spicer. It got a 4 to 5 overall score with 4 for story, 4 for artwork, 0 for theological basis, and a 4 for our recommendation score. So solid 4 all around. Next on the list at number 18 is a Remnant issue 3. The introduction of the youngest members to the Remnant, the ones who I believe went on to form the Remnant version of the Teen Titans and those young Avengers style groups, like those younger superheroes. In the Remnant, they're called the Last Gen. But this is their induction onto the Remnant before they go and break off and create their own superhero group. I covered Last Gen issue 0 last year. I believe issue 1 of Last Gen is to come next year, and I really like the concept of Last Gen as well as the heroes that are on Last Gen. This issue was the induction into the remnant of Gemstar, Atoman, and Calvary, and it showed all their training montage sessions and the foreshadowing of the long teased Robotron takeover of the Remnant universe, which I am most excited for after my podcast interview with both Evan David and Bill Roop. Evan David is writing it, and as you guys know, on the Xplanations, I am Evan David's self-proclaimed number 1 fan. I look forward to see what he's gonna do with a Age of Ultron style story inside of a world where heroes assemble to fight the Antichrist. So I'm looking forward to that book. This book did some setting up for that, and the trailer montage section was really nice to see of it. It's like any cartoon you've ever watched that had a training montage. These young guys had a training montage, and then they joined the Remnant, got sent on the first mission, and it was that kind of feel good all around comic book. It got an overall score of 3.7 out of 5, with 3.75 for story, a 4 for artwork and creativity, a 3 for theological basis, and a 4 for recommendation score. Next on the list at number 17 is Pulpit issue 1 with art and story by Ken Bowden. Ken, shouting on my brother, Ken is my illustrator, my artist for my comic book series Intercession and a lot of my creative endeavors, and Ken is the homie. Just wanted to shout him out in that way. But at number 17 is Pulpit issue 1. This was a Ashcan version, and the story was pretty solid. It introduces my favorite superhero pastor yet, Pastor Silas, and it was simply an introduction issue with in that kind of much more to come style of first issue is the best way to put it. Teasing a little backstory between the characters with some mystery to hook us in the form of what in the world did Crazy Claude do to Rivitra and Rolling Thunder's son that Pastor Silos could have stopped but didn't, which led to them hating him even more. Really like the direction that they're setting up for the series. Again, this was a Ashcan edition, meaning the art wasn't all the way there. It was just get the to my knowledge, what an Ashcan edition is getting the idea out of your head and you put it onto, I believe it was it Global Comics? I think it was Global Comics. But this is Pulpit issue 1. Looking forward to where the story goes. It got a 3.8 overall score out of 5, with a 3.75 for story, 3 for artwork and creativity, 5 for theological basis, and a 3.5 out of 5 for the recommendation score. Next on the list at number 16 is a Remnant issue 4. The much teased and my most anticipated issue of the Remnant, taking on the Watchers in a direct head-on battle with Blue Flame Soul on the line. And for what it was, it turned out to be a pretty cool fight. Some wild statements were thrown out for sure, but it is to be expected in a battle where a group of God assembled heroes are fighting against the Antichrist and his band of demonically empowered followers. Surprisingly, I like the one-shot issue leading up to this battle more than the actual battle. And I'll state my case on why that is when we get to that book. But I did enjoy this book. It wasn't underwhelming. I can't remember 100% what I said in the review. You could, of course, check out the review for the book. Overall, it got a 3.875 out of 5 score with 3.5 for story, a 4 for artwork and creativity, a 5 out of 5 for the logical basis, and a 3 for recommendation score. Written by Bill Roop with art by Gilead Monsanto. At least that was the only artwork credit I have noted down here that I could find. It lived up to the expectation that I had for it of what the battle for Blue Flame Soul could have turned out to be. But yes, other Revenant stories had more. The other Revenant stories that we cover for the year, which you would see where they are placed higher up on this list, had more depth and more reread potential for me than this story. As I said, the tie-in comic for this, like the one shot before this issue that I didn't realize was the one that was supposed to come before this. I actually read it and reviewed it after I covered this issue. I liked the one shot that led into this book more than the actual battle, to be honest, because of just like the character dynamics that were thrown into it rather than just the battle of this issue. So it sits at number 16 on our list. At number 15 is another Remnant book, Parables of the Remnant, issue 6, the solo issue of the best B-inspired hero out there, buzzed on a mission to stop another insect-inspired hero, Toxin, who was strategically planning on targeting some bee and crop farmers that decided to not bend the knee to the newest agricultural mega corporation that wants everyone to get in line under them as the only source of seeds and plant stuff. In the efforts to speed up that plan, they started sending out, like, hiring these fire-based heroes. Well, not heroes, fire-based villains to go and burn down some of the crop farms. There was also a fight with Blue Flame, who was one of them that went hitting one of the farms, and they kind of, I think, Tech9 or I think Raytheon, but my memory serves me correctly, stepped in to help take him down at the to help Biz take him down because Biz was getting overpowered in the battle, and they helped take him down and stop him from doing the bad stuff. Overall, it was a pretty good issue and a really well put together story. I like this issue. Parables of the Revenant a lot. It got an overall score of 4.375 out of 5 with 4.5 out of 5 for story, 5 out of 5 for artwork and creativity, a 4 for theological basis, and a 4 for recommendation score. It was written by Bill Roop and Jose Cruz with artwork by Osvaldo Ferreira. Next on the list at issue 14, we have Blue Jay issue 2. This issue was definitely a step up from Blue Jay issue 1, and it got me hooked even more into the series. Continuing Jason's story and giving a deeper dive into how exactly his powers work, which are derived from an angel that empowers him. When compared to the demon that empowers Sam, the conflict between Jason and Sam in this issue was well put together, and I enjoyed it a lot, especially how Jania got caught up in the mix. It is one of the more recent comics that we covered before locking up our comic reviews for the year for the purpose of this podcast installment. So you could check it out for my full review, of course, of it, but the dialogue of this one, the back and forth between Jason and Sam and Jania, it was really well done. Because overall, it got a 4.125 out of 5 overall score. Yes, we don't round off here. 4 for story, a 4 for art and creativity, a 4.5 on the theological basis. It could have gotten 5 out of 5, but I just still had some questions on the execution of the theological aspects of being empowered by an angel and being possessed by a demon that I just needed to see that cleared up before I give the overall series a 5 out of 5 with a 4 out of 5 for recommendation. It was written by John Delarose, whose content on YouTube I do like a lot. I do plan to check out his comics in our cadence next year, as well as Gabriel Hill, who was the other author and the author of the other. I believe Gabriel Hill is the creator of the Asper comics. Don't quote me on that. I believe so. Yes, I believe so. I think you could quote me on that. With artwork by Antonio Garcia, Luca Cicchetti, Gilbert Monsanto, Timothy Brown, and Katija Lupio. Next on the list is the Remnant Annual Issue 1 with a really short description I have for this in my script is this issue was the story of the Remnant so far and what is to come style. That was it pretty much, but I really liked how they did it because the Remnant has a lot of books and to hop on to the Remnant and it might say I think the Remnant to date has 30 issues and people can at times get intimidated by how much issues there is. So this was more so the story of the Remnant so far compiled into one book, as well as where it's going from here on out. On my scale, I gave it a 4.75 overall score, with 4 for story, 5 for artwork and creativity, 5 for theological basis, and 5 out of 5 for recommendation score. I recommend it as one of the best jumping on points for the Remnant other than the mainline Remnant books, especially issue 0, which is how they relaunch from Tribulation Task Force to the Remnant. Writer's credits goes to Bill Roth, the creator of the Remnant himself, with art credits to Grace Solanzo, Luis Rivera, and Edgar Travatas. At number 12, we have Parables of the Remnant issue 7. The Rapture and Zap origin stories, which honestly didn't disappoint, at least especially for the Rapture segment. She was one of the characters when I first found out about the Remnant and started to check out their pin-ups that I was most excited to see what her powers were and her backstory was. The Zap origin was pretty cool, but I mean, to be honest, I was really more interested in in what Rapture was all about, as she was the one that was on the cover of the book. I think there's a variant cover for Zap, but I mean that book was really more so all about Rapture with a side story of Zap, because Rapture is this she's a remnant healer, but her healing capabilities comes from she takes the pain of the person and redistributes it into actual energy. It's fiction. That's how it works. She got her powers from an angel. Well, an angel in the form of a homeless man that she helped out, bestowed her powers upon her. And it was written by, Evan David wrote it. I believe in our interview he said that Bill gave him a character he could pick from any character to flesh out a backstory for. He picked Rapture. That was the backstory he gave Rapture, and it was the pacing of the book and everything on how she ended up joining the Remnant in the end. Especially after she was actually on her way to join Apollyon and his forces, but then got intercepted by the Remnant and ended up joining the Remnant instead, and has been the resident healer who takes care of folks when they get damaged in battle. That concept of a healer that takes on the person's pain, like transfers the pain or whatnot from them onto themselves and distributes it as energy. I haven't. Is there? Maybe I don't read enough comics or fiction to really see that there isn't someone else like that. At least for me, it was the first time I saw that concept, especially within the context of she is a Christian. At least from the concept of, at least from what is shown of her, she is a Christian. So that within a Christian comic book context was a pretty cool concept. Scored an overall score of 4.75 with 4 for story, 5 for artwork and creativity, 5 for theological basis, and 5 for my recommendation score. Written by Evan David and Bill Robb with artwork by Gilead Angiro, Pentia Pelia, and Gilbert Monsanto. Next on the list at number 11, we have Erg the Battler issue 3. This comic, hands down, has one of my favorite rooftop conversations of all the comics we have covered on the channel yet. The conversation between John and Erg on the rooftop of Seth's house, yes, the descendant of Adam, that's Seth's house, after they were on the run from the Nephilim Zos, who married John, got her pregnant, demands that she sacrifice the child to the gods for favor, and it obviously did not sit right with John and her parents, so John and her parents ran away in hopes of escaping Zos, who does end up catching up to them many times throughout the series. I mean, this issue is how it led in. This issue leads into the final issue of issue 4 of how he caught up to them, and the way he did it, the way Zos did it, or the way it was illustrated of him riding a behemoth, which the behemoth in this kind of antediluvian, on Evan David's take on the antediluvian world, is dinosaurs. The seeing a Nephilim ride a dinosaur was epic. It was epic. Sam Samoa's artwork for that page of Zos riding a dinosaur, that was just well done. There was some other elements of the artwork, especially on the chase scene, that didn't really work with Sam Samoa's style of artwork. It confused me, particularly with some of the angles that it tried in the chase scene. It came out more confusing than exciting at some points, but that element of it, that Zos riding the behemoth, that was top tier. But what I liked a lot of this issue, which is why it sits at number 11 on our list, is John's confession and sort of apology for getting them into the situation they are in. Because she intentionally went into the marriage with Zos despite knowing what exactly could have come out from it. And it's just, F.N. David has a way with dialogue, and the way how he strings especially like these kind of scenes where it's like one character speaking to another, especially with the theme of it that he goes for, like the Black Blossom Annual issue. The Black Blossom Annual that we covered last year is one of those great examples, as well as the Tiffany Knight, my favorite comic book from last year, which was written by him. The Parables of the Remnant Special Edition number 1, I think is what it was, that Tiffany Knight solo issue. It's a really great way when it comes to these kind of dialogues, especially like talking about sin and just making decisions, especially like making bad decisions, and he's not somebody. It's weird. It's weird for me to like when I ever try to like explain Evan's dialogue off the top of my head, I always end up going into a ramble with my words. But it's best that I just show you it here. It's currently on screen. Just show you it on screen and you make your decision. But for me, when I read it, I was like, wow, this is really cool. I really liked how we string together the dialogue between John and Erg on the rooftop of Seth's house. Overall, this issue of Erg the Battler got a 4.375 score, with a 4 for story, a 3.5 score for artwork and creativity, a 5 for theological basis, and a 5 for the recommendation score. At number 10 is Star-Crossed Team Up issue 1 with Trashman and Starstruck. Reviewed in the video appropriately titled Nephilims Learn of the Biblical Origin to Their Power, featuring Starstruck from various Star-Crossed comics books and Trashman from the Luke Stone's Hybrid Son of God's book, which we do plan to review next year. This issue follows the duo's adventure into a cave at a disclosed location after getting an anonymous invitation. At first, when they saw each other and Starstruck took the opportunity to settle a score, they both thought that the other person was the one who sent out the invite. But it turned out that it was neither of them, and after venturing deeper into the cave, they discovered it came from the Nephilim Gorgon, who professed to have some biblical ties all the way back to Joshua and the king of Anakim, which Christian commentary sources of the Descriptions of Anakim in Deuteronomy ascribe them as a formidable race of giant warlike people, whom Joshua defeated in his conquest according to Joshua 11 verse 22. Gorgon also revealed that the reason why it invited them was because it needed to sacrifice them to power up some machine that is capable of wiping out humans but only runs on Nephilim blood. Obviously, the duo wants no part and fights their way out of there after much struggle and getting beat from Gorgon and awakening the machine, pulling upon a surge of energy Starstruck felt when they initially entered the cave. They channel it and cause the cave to fall in on both Gorgon and the machine. But in true comic book fashion, even after waiting quite some time to ensure that the machine and Gorgon were destroyed for good, that quite never is the case. What I liked a lot about this book and why it sits at number 10 on our list is mainly the fictional spin on an open-ended biblical concept pulling from Joshua, as well as the banter between Starstruck and Trashman. I did go more in depth on that in the review that we did, but I like for example, there's many perspectives to Nephilim. Sons of God, they were not sons of God, it was just a term. They were not the merge of a human and angel. There's many perspectives, and in this my personal take on it when it comes to how it's used in fictional approach, most of those perspectives, especially as well with the end times for me personally, I view it in like a similar category of fiction until there's like something 100% concrete, especially with the end times. Everyone has their perspective on the end times, what the Antichrist is going to be, A-trib, post-trib, millennial, etc. And those are things that is like everyone has a speculation, but no one is 100% right because it has not happened. Same thing with like the Nephilim. No one was there back then, and most of the records of it has like gotten spun in all sorts of directions and all sorts of things. Like, yeah, you could do your research and come to this conclusion, and then someone using the exact same research text come to another conclusion. For me, once it's all theologically sung in regards to where does the story stand on the salvation of Christ and those elements, as well as not rewriting Bible scripture but taking like stuff like, I don't know, like the kings of Anakim. It said that they were a formidable race of giant warlike people, and it is believed that the descendants of Anakim is some of the giants that David slayed during his time and where Goliath originated from. So that open-ended take, yes, there was not in the Bible, it doesn't talk anything about some giant machine that needed to run on Nephilim blood, but that perspective of that, taking that open-ended scripture and fictionalizing it, that's kind of like biblical spoofs that I like to see. Not with what happened in Resurrection, where they took something that is clear cut, had a full stop put on it, and twist it and spin it like that. But things like this, where it's like Nephilims running around in modern day time with superpowers and stuff, and actually trying to do well, like far descend, like generations removed descendants of Nephilim, trying to do good and coming to the Lord and stuff like that. That is like, those are stories that I like. Story that Luke Stone and Joe Spicer put together for this issue, especially like as I said, the banter between Starstruck and Trashman and everything, it all gelled pretty well together. So overall, written by Luke Stone and Joe Spicer, with art by Joe Spicer and Edgar Travatas, Starcross Team Up Issue 1 got a 4.5 overall score, with 4 for story, 4 for artwork and creativity, a 5 for theological basis, because I really like, as I said, how that fictional spoof on that Bible scripture that they did, and 5 for recommendation score. At number 9, we have Red Talon Issue 3, and this issue was an even better step up than issue 2 in all categories, especially in regards to the story and art. This issue had one of my favorite fight scenes of the Red Talon book, where Red Talon and Friends, I don't know if they gave this stuff a good name, but they're just going to say Red Talon and Friends had a direct confrontation with Dark. The only thing that was a little underwhelming for me was the ending. A little cheap of the hero must be defeated and this shall be explained further kind of element after he was putting down some dirty moves on the villain. I personally think if they wanted to take that approach of it, of like he needs to be defeated to further the story, I think it would have been better to establish that already prior to the fight, or just have him get his butt washed, or even let the villain get away with a cheap tactic. I feel like the villain getting away with a cheap tactic goes over better than the hero being told telepathically by his master, "You must lose. It's the only way," kind of thing. Especially, at least the way I think it's the how the illustration of what Red Talon was putting down made it feel really cheap. If it was like an even battle with like where he was losing the battle, like it was a brawl, but there were elements of it where Red Talon literally was just schooling Burning Skull. And to like turn the page and see that you must lose the battle was kind of like, I don't know, it left a sour taste for me. Dude went from dominant to docile in 2 panels, and I was just like, come on, like it would have been better for Burning Skull to pull some kind of gimmick and get away than, all right then, I'll just take the beating. Like that for me was just, it was. I understand why they did it for like the story, but I didn't like it. Maybe I'm nitpicking, but that ruined the ending of the book for me. It didn't ruin the rest of the book. Like everything before that point was awesome. All the backstories, Clark's backstories, and everything building off of what happened in issue 2, coming into issue 3. The battle, how the guys who failed in issue 2 had to face off Burning Skull, who Burning Skull is just wicked and everything. Just seeing that main character is I need to like just this random like pop up. The guy say he needs to lose. All right, I shall lose, and he loses. After putting on, and the artwork for this was awesome, but just that of him getting beat because he needs to be beaten, rather than like he was sharing licks and they're like, okay, I'll be beaten then and go away. That kind of saw the end for me, but everything else in the book was awesome and I highly recommend it. I mean, it is number 9 out of 33 on our list. Overall, it got a 4.5 overall score for 4 for story, 4.5 out of 5 for artwork and creativity, 0 for theological basis, and a 5 for recommendation score. Written by Kenneth Keller and Amon Jacobs with artwork by Brian Dawson and Alan Emanuel. Next on the list at number 8 is Biblical Proportions Issue 2, the second issue of the resurrected Nephilim that is on a mission to cause chaos throughout the multiverse. And in this issue, it was more of a setup for the final 2 issues and an amendment of issue 1, confirmed by both Evan David and Joe Spicer from our interviews with them throughout the year. Biblical Proportions issue 1 scored high on our list last year. I think it scored number 8. So I think it's at number 8 in both years. It came in at number 8. But it mainly scored number 8 because of the concept and the collaborative effort of the book. I think this is a collaboration effort of over 20 creators, correct, faith-based and non-faith-based creators coming together to make one. Well, Joe Spicer assembling all the heroes from all different books in Starcross and outside of Starcross, the Asprey books and different creators into this one big this big crossover event. And for that I respected it a lot, and the idea that they were going for I really liked it, but the execution of the story was a bit lackluster and even confusing in some points of issue 1, which the guys over at Sacros agreed upon, and Evan David came on to streamline the book a bit more for the final 3 issues, and I really like the direction it is setting up on for a proper collision course between the heroes ripped from various universes and Hellsmite. Especially with how they fleshed out Hellsmite's backstory and from what point he was resurrected on. I liked the backstory of Hellsmite so much, and I think that, like, Hellsmite in his prime, I think they set him to exist 3500 BC or something like that. Hellsmite in his prime, or if there's a book if there's like a one shot of Hellsmite in his prime long before he was resurrected, 2000 years later, but 5000 years later, I think a Hellsmite in his prime with like the heroes of that time fighting against him, or just showing that I think it would be a one shot that there probably isn't much of an audience for it, but I know for me, in particular, I would love to see a Hell Sprite in his prime book kind of thing. Because Urg the Battler was one of them that was fighting against Hell Sprite. So he existed around the same time with Urg, at least from the artwork, and I think something like that would be really cool to see. With right credits to Evan David and artwork by Brian Dawson and Joe Spicer, this issue got a 4.67 out of 5 score overall, with 4 for story, 5 for artwork and creativity, and a 5 for recommendation. At number 7 on our list is Urg the Battler issue 1, written by Evan David with artwork by Samir Samoa. And this, I touched on issue 3, but in a nutshell, the story of Urg the Battler is a family on the run from the Nephilim husband of their daughter because he wants to sacrifice their child to the gods for favor, and being one of the few people in the land that follow the ways of the god of Adam, they couldn't allow that to happen, so they fled, enlisting the aid of Urg, the battler, to protect them on their journey through the land to safe haven. As expected, nothing was smooth sailing at all for them, as they got chased down by John's husband, Zos, and barely got away. The panel-to-panel dialogue and Zos sprinting behind them in the car all went really well and got me really excited for the next 3 issues of the series. This issue scored a similar score to Biblical Proportions issue 2, a 4.67 out of 5 overall score, with 4 for story, a 5 for artwork and creativity, 0 for theological basis, which usually with Evan David's issue 1s, it rarely has anything theological to really hit on in the first issue. The theological heavy stone and like the theological heavy hitters of his books usually come in at issue 3 or issue 2 of the book. So this one didn't have anything much theological that I could have discussed, even though there was like setting up Urg's journey of doubt, of not believing in the God of Adam and deciding to pray to safety from an idol that he set up rather than believing in the God of Adam. It was just a setup, not really any kind of pushing it to the forefront like he usually does in his second issue or third issue for the books, with a recommendation score of 5. At number 6 is Calvary Academy issue 2. A book that started off hot with Caleb, the misfit kid time traveler who stole a device from an angel, runs into young Jesus and is now being attacked by a principality that manifested out of a Pharisee. Yes, that is the part of the plot, and it actually worked well. After they pulled the Pharisee to decide the Pharisee's physical body, they try to put together a plan, and while trying to put together the plan, they are attacked again with the principality knocking out young Jesus this time around. Caleb's immediate instinct was to run away, but remembered all that he heard and has been through on his journey thus far, and he decides to stand his ground with his affinity, which is their take on spiritual weapons of warfare. I believe it's inspired from our interview with Joel Minute, which is the last podcast installment, actually. Episode 15 of the podcast. I believe it was inspired by things like Kingdom Heart and taking the biblical aspect of it, but the implementation was inspired by Kingdom Heart and the anime aspects of the anime Bleach, if I'm not mistaken. I never watched Bleach, but that's what the author said, and I do like how his implementation of it in the story works with his affinity, his gauntlets forming around his hand. And he takes on the principality head on, followed by being aided and empowered by Jesus, defeating it with Caleb collapsing from just like from the battle, and then being sent back into his time in the present day at the academy with Ariak. This issue really did a good job in the way that how it handled Caleb's character development between issue 1 and issue 2, which really was quite well in my opinion, and got me hooked to see how it continues to develop as the series continues. I mean, dude went from throwing hands in the church's courtyard in issue 1 to throwing hands at principalities with Jesus. I mean, that is That really is some character development in 2 issues. Well, at least the Cavalry Academy's take on the entity, which is actually this is actually one of the few time travel based stories. I don't really like time travel stories, mainly because one, it causes confusion, and two, some time travel stories try to be a little bit too creative. In the name of being creative, decide to do madness. So I don't really like time travel based stories all that much, especially the within the like faith based realm too much. But this is one of the few time travel based stories I actually like and do co-sign. So, Cavalry Academy issue 2, written by Joel Minot with artwork by Joel Minot. It gets a 4.5 overall score from the Xplanations, with 4 for story, 4 for artwork and creativity, a 5 for theological basis, and a 5 for my recommendation. Next on the list is Tales of Power issue 2. This is my top 5, everything from my top 10. From top 10 is like my order of what was my favorite book to cover. And at number 5 is Tales of Power issue 2. Written by Gabriel Dill and Paul Bell, with art by Carlo Gradi and Khadija Luhiho. I really love this issue, especially Oates' dialogue, who honestly is my favorite superhero reverend we have seen in any of the books we have covered across the channel. He is the most, as I said in the review, he is the most King James sounded hero we have ever come across, and this book was just straight 29 pages full of action, of assembling different heroes to help fight against the beast that rose out of the river. Seeing all 11 heroes join the battle in this issue, each bringing their own style and flair, even though it had a new hero introduced I think it was every 2 pages, like every page turn had every like major page turn had a hero. It felt smooth and well thought out. Sadly, there were no future issues because they did set up they did set up more things to come, like with Atlantis attacking and all this kind of stuff. They did set that up, but this issue came out all the way back in 2016, and there are no future issues after this one that I could find of Tales of Power. But this issue was one of the most fun comic books one of the most times I had reviewing a comic book series. I really liked all the action, all the dialogue and everything in it. I saw no fault with it. I tried to take a point off just because I was like, oh, well, I'm gonna give it 4.5 at first, but then I was like, I can't justify the 4.5. So it just got a 5 out of 5 on my scale, to be honest. Because there was nothing really I could fault the book for. I enjoyed every page of it, every page of the 29, every page of the book I enjoyed. And this was one of the few perfect score comic books that we gave this year, with only 5 of the books, 5 out of the 33 books that we covered this year, getting 5 out of 5. Next on the list is Urg the Battler issue 4. This issue brought this antediluvian tale of a hired bodyguard trying to protect a family on the run from their daughter's Nephilim husband, who wants to sacrifice their child to the gods in exchange for continued favor to a very satisfying end. Yes, Zeus died at the gate that leads to the Garden of Eden. And I have to be honest, it was awesome seeing Urg and Zeus square off, as I said, at the gate that leads to the Garden of Eden. I love the approach to the story, especially their approach of keeping the story theologically grounded. And I must say, Urg's coming to faith journey is the biggest highlight of this issue and the story as a whole. Because he went from calling the God of Adam a myth, because this is antediluvian set during that time after Adam left the Garden of Eden to before so the antediluvian period is between the Garden of Eden and after the Garden of Eden to before Noah and the flood. So during that time, in the Bible it talks about the heart of man was desperately wicked on the earth. When God looked down on it, he was in complete despair of what was going on the earth. In Urg's eyes, he was like, everybody have a god. Everybody talking about this, Adam and his myths and fairy tales. I ain't care about any of that. You telling me he is the god of Adam, is the one true god, yada yada yada. He didn't care about any of that. But after just the experience with Zeus, like being chased by Zeus, and talking to John and meeting Seth, the descendant of Adam, and all of that, and standing face to face with the angel that guards the Garden of Eden. Erg had his coming to Christ, I can't say coming to Christ moment, coming to God moment, because it's antediluvian. Erg had his coming to God moment with after coming face to face with the oh yeah, as I said, after coming face to face with the angel that guards the Garden of Eden, more, that was more than enough evidence for him that it became pretty much insurmountable. Coming to that realization that what seemed like his dying breath, had it not been for the grace of God, is it like that battle with Zus? It was a gruesome battle. He was really badly banged up at the end of that battle. Just to add on top of that, with Urg's journey and everything Urg was going through, was John's journey from self guilt to forgiveness after her conversation with the angel at the gate of the Garden of Eden, telling Urg at the end that if God can accept her for what she has done, then he can surely accept Urg. Because Urg still had some doubt on if God would accept him after everything they've been through and everything he said and everything he's done. That John was like, no, if he could accept me for the nonsense that I did throughout the story, or that led to the story, then he could definitely accept you. And then to also add Evan's sort of gospel track commentary at the end of the digital issue, where he draws some parallel between Urg's selfless act and Jesus' sacrifice for us, as well as the in-depth breakdown into the world of Urg included at the at the very end of the series. It all just came together really well to the point that I highly recommend Urg the Battler as one of my favorite series that I've reviewed in 2024. At number 3 is Distant Thunder issue 1. This one is definitely one of my favorites from The Remnant, as it is the most fleshed out story from The Remnant that I have read in all my reviews of The Remnant. I think I have over 25. I've reviewed 25 of The Remnant books, and this one was just a great reading experience, or like overall. Don Perkins really did a great job with the character building in this issue. All the dialogue between the characters were really well put together. The artwork in the first couple pages by Alan Shaw, the cover artist for a lot of the DC animated books, are straight fire. The rest of the illustrations by Benetau Eden were great as well for the rest of the comic, but the theological workings of the story, seeing Thief in the Night quoting suffer not the little children while reading the child trafficking cult and sharing links out to everyone, that was just chef's kiss for me when I read that. As well as the aspects of Malcolm holding fast his faith while in prison, even when things seemed bleak and Apollyon was appearing to him with offer that he seemed to not that an offer that seemed too good to pass up on. It was just, this entire comic was just great all around. It is, as I say, it is my third favorite issue of the year. Not gonna re-review the comic because I gushed over it already in our review, but this deserves the spot number 3 on my list from what we've covered. Oh, and by the way, everything in the top 5 has so far had a 5 out of 5 overall score in all 5 categories, because for me personally, it satisfied all 5 categories of what I look for. My second favorite comic of the year was Urg the Battler issue 2. A certified Evan David issue 2 for me at this point. The pacing of this issue was a lot of fun to read. The plot direction is one that we have seen time and time again in fictional stories of the hired bodyguard being wounded in a fight against the main antagonist, leading to the ones who are in their protection having to venture forward and seek out help for them. A classic story plot point set in the antediluvian period of a girl on the run from a Nephilim husband who wants to sacrifice a child to the gods, which I really love how the story continued to flesh out the allure and threat of Zus, to the point that after all I said about issue 4, this one was the one that really hit the most for me and stuck. I really like the story premise of the people in the antediluvian world struggling to find others who truly believe in the one true God of Adam. I personally think Evan David hit the nail on the head with what he was trying to achieve and execute with the theological basis of this issue. Especially with the plot direction, seeing them end up meeting Seth, the son of Adam, doing his best to keep his descendants steadfast to the worship of the one true God of his father. And to add to that, Erg's skepticism and calling the worship of God old stories and fairy tales really drove the rest of the issue home for me. It was one of those that I reread twice. Usually I read a book like I read it once, then I do a read and script pass. But Erg the Battler was one of those that I read once, twice, and I think 3 times, then did my read and script pass because I liked the issue. I liked the story that much, and it is in my highly recommend. I mean, is the second favorite book I've covered on the channel this year. My number one favorite book of 2024 of the Christian themed comics that we've covered is Blue Flame issue 0. The one-shot issue that I loved more than the mainline issue it was connecting to. Because the direction they took with Blue Flame and his whole schizophrenia angle of him suffering between his regular human self and the alter ego of his powers was really well done. It gave the Remnant issue 4 even more depth, to be honest, especially when it comes to the fight for his soul. That was the premise of that issue. And I read this issue after I read that issue of Remnant issue 4. Blue Flame siding with Apollyon has been a major narrative point throughout the Remnant series thus far, and to finally see the struggle he endures from being driven insane by his powers, yet fighting to do good and follow the values instilled by his parents and extended family is honestly one of the most interesting things I've seen from the series thus far. And I was like 26 issues deep into it, mind you. The emergency meeting discourse was honestly well done in context to how the characters have been established. Flameshot and Pinkspade, Blue Flame's parents, have been living with the crushing feeling of their son, who they did their best to train up in the way he should go so that he will not depart from it when he gets older. They use that scripture from Proverbs. Turns out to not only abandon them, but sides with the Antichrist when they are Christian heroes. And Man of War, who's more on a mission and the reality of the situation comes first, isn't necessarily opposed to the thought of him potentially coming back, but the reality of what comes with that, especially with the chaos he has caused recently. And that triggered Alex, Flameshot, who has been holding back the secrets of his past in fear of not being accepted by the squad, and I am sure feels guilty for the situation his son is in, as Derek, Blue Flame, only biologically inherited his powers from the experiments done to Alex from the choices he made when he was younger. And if Man of War has such a strong stance towards his son, who they've seen and raised and see the path that he has gone down, Alex could only imagine their reaction when they learn that he was a hired assassin and an underworld crime boss for many years and all that. I just loved the narrative direction of this issue. It was in a kind of like the prodigal son in a superhero kind of context, but actually biblical. Like they were throwing, then they were back and forth things, some scriptures of, I think they were referring to him as the prodigal son. And just the narrative and the dialogue of it this is one of like those issues of the Remnant where I'm like, yeah, this is why I am such a big champion for the Remnant. It was written by Bill Roap and Don Perkins with writing credits to Aris Gonzalez, Gilbert Monsanto, and Michael Woods. Just the way they weave the narrative between the characters, especially that round table with Raytheon, I think it was Raytheon, Tech 9, Man of War, Pinkspade, and Flameshot on like, yeah, but I understand what you're saying, but our son's soul comes first. It's like, how do you not get that? Man of War had to like back and forth, and like I'm not trying to cause offense, and everybody was like, dude, you need to choose your words wisely. It's like, yeah, we understand our mission and public perception, but we are talking about the soul of one of our own, like a kid that we all raised that went down a bad path. Is like, we would accept him with open arms, and that the back and forth between them on that round table. Don Perkins did a really, really great job with executing that dialogue between the characters. It felt It felt believable, even as like it is purely fictitious. The way the characters, the voice that he gave the characters, felt so you could have felt the emotion in Kaylee's dialogue as a mother. On like, I should like raise my son, raised him among you guys and everything. Prayed that he came back, and it just so happens. Prayed that he came back. Prayed that he followed the right path, and no matter what we did, he still chose to go and follow everything that we have been fighting against. And we couldn't really do anything about it. He chose on by his own free will. All we could have done is pray that he turns away from that one day. And this is the chance for him to potentially come back before he takes the red baptism and damns his soul for all eternity. And all we can do right now is just pray and hope that he comes back. And to hear that someone, that even the chance of him coming back, that someone, that one of their own, like one of their own Christian leaders within the group was man of what I think is the strategic leader of the remnant, to hear like, you more concerned about our public perception of taking back our son who we just saved from damning his soul for all eternity. Like, yeah, we understand consequences of actions and all that, but this is like, everyone was against Man of One. I was against Man of One too. I was like, I understand what you're saying, but come on now. Like, the way they gave the voice of the characters. Maybe I'm reading too deep into it because I read too much Remnant books. I read all 26 books. So I know each character and how each character has been written to this point. This issue was the one comic that I felt immersed. That's the best way to put it. Immersed in. And I loved it. I loved this issue a lot. Because it was so, that round table talk, it was so immersive into. I think that's like why I loved it so much. Why it like, this is the only comic I felt like really immersed into this story. So yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's why I love this issue so much. It was awesome. Don Perkins did an awesome job with the dialogue of that section. I believe Don Perkins was the one who wrote that section, and Bill Roth wrote the opening section showing Blue, that like schizophrenic aspect to Blue Flame. But I think I said love like 9 times now, but I loved Blue Flame issue 0. It's funny, the one shot leading up to the final battle, I love the one shot more than the actual big battle that they've been teasing for, I think, since the inception. The first book I read from the Remnant. This comic was awesome and is number 1 on my list of the comics we've covered in 2024, because that's it for our ranking of all 33 comics that we reviewed in 2024. Do let me know what you think down below. Do you disagree with my takes? Has my reviews of the comics made you want to get into the series? I know if you guys have I know some of you don't have the disposable income to spend on the comics, so you watch the reviews and just enjoy it through the reviews. But I would highly just request, if you have the disposable income, to actually pick up one of the books that you like a lot. It helps out the creators a lot. I don't want these reviews and podcasts to just become to circumvent what the creators and they do. They have given me the rights to show any page that I want from their books. So I do it in fair use, so they can't really pull me up on that. But Bill and Joe and Evan, they have been so supportive of the channel, of what I do with the reviews and everything, and don't give me any stress or fuss. If I have any questions, they answer it promptly. They send me extra art if I need it for thumbnails and stuff. And just, if you enjoy these reviews, and at least the thing with these reviews and these podcasts is I hope that at least it helps you to find a Christian creative that you probably didn't know about and actually fall in love with their work like I did. I'm always upfront about it. I don't think that some of these books and don't replace some of the greatest Marvel comics. In their comments at times I see people saying that, oh, this is better than Marvel. I personally don't think a lot of these books are better than some of the top Marvel stories out there. It is better than a lot of the mediocre Marvel stories out there for sure, but it's all just about building that alternative market of as gospel infused entertainment options out there. And I hope you enjoy these videos. And if there's any, all the purchase links will be down in the description, and I will encourage you to at least buy one of them in the top 10 to check out. Or my favorite book, Blue Flame Issue 0. You don't really need a lot of prior. Well, I mean, it goes better when you know who have read like the amount of volume of the comics that I've done. But then again, I center my channel around reading as much of these and reviewing them, because if there's no comics out there, then there's no reviews I could do. But I immerse myself in these things, and I highly recommend that you do too. Let me know what you think of what I've discussed. Do you think I'm too like fanboyish over some of these and don't give as much of an objective review and things I omit that you think should have decreased the score on some of these comics? How can I improve the comic book score? How can I improve our ratings? And as well, if you have any comics you want me to check out for 2024, we have Hybrid Son of God. We have, I think it's Knights of Power to review. I can't remember the name of that one. A guy from the Discord came in and dropped his book. I want to give him the proper, I'm going to give you guys the proper name of that book. It is Knights of Justice by XP Comics. That is one of the first books we're going to review next year. There is Dominion House of Soul. We also want to get into Gabriel and the Guardian. I started doing more, not just comic reviews, but comics and games and entertainment. They have a lot of stuff planned. I have a lot of stuff, reviews and stuff planned for next year. So thank you for listening to this point in the podcast. It has been running for 31 minutes. I appreciate every single one of you. I appreciate all the creators that send in their stuff, as well as allow me to do these kind of reviews of this stuff and take the criticism without blacklisting me. I know Joe talks about Joe Spicer, the StarCross Comics, talks about that in our podcast. It was like, not just because I'm like cool with these guys, like some of them are Evan David and Bill Rupp are on to be advisors for my own comic series, as well as when it comes to art. Michael Woods from his color work on Blue Flame Issue 0, my favorite comic of the year, is the colorist for my own comic book series and stuff. So it's been awesome covering comics this year, and I look forward to doing it next year. And I thank you all for your support throughout it, both creator and viewer. And I highly recommend that you guys pick up some of these comics that are in my top 10, or even something outside of the top 10 that sounded interesting to you that wasn't really all that interesting to me. It is all like, this is, we're trying to build a fandom here, and that's what it's about. Agreements and disagreements. So, yeah, that's it for the 16th installment of the Kedoshim Initiative Podcast. See you guys in the next episode, and until then, have a blessed week and month from the Xplanations. Thanks.